Hey guys, what's up? My name is Dom. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new to my channel, I typically make bookish content, movie content, and anything else in between because I like to do whatever I want on this channel, and tonight is going to be bookish content. For today's video, I'm going to go over all the books that I read in the month of May. I read a ton of books. I have so many to talk about because in May I was trying to challenge myself to read a volume of manga every day. So the goal was 31 volumes. However, I did not reach that goal. I only read 20 because I was really slacking in like the last half of the month. But 20 volumes is still a lot. That's still a lot of books to talk about. And not only that, but I was listening to other audiobooks. So in total, I have 23 books to talk about, which is insane. So therefore, I am just going to jump right into this video. Just fair warning, when it comes to the manga, I've stuck to very specific series. So I'm only going to be mentioning 3 series because I know there's people out there, they could read like 20 series at once. I can't do that, but so you're going to hear a lot of repetition. Alright, so book 1 is Chainsaw Man, volume 12 by Tatsuki Fujimoto. I did not write down any names on this, so I'm going to be forgetting things. Chainsaw Man takes place in a world that is overrun by devils. Devils are based on your fears and feed on your fears, so the more people who are scared of them, the bigger they are. Our main character, Denji, was on his deathbed when Pochita, who was the chainsaw devil of sorts, inserted his body into Denji, and now Denji is the Chainsaw Man. Volume 12 is the beginning of part 2. Volumes 1 through 11 were like the public safety arc, and then volume 2 is considered the school arc, basically. I know there's a lot of arcs in this series, but the author himself is considering the 2 parts 2 arcs. So this one kind of threw me for a loop at first just because there is a main character switch. As I kept reading, Denji did come back. He is still the main character. But I was a little taken aback when he didn't show up in any of the first few chapters, and Asa Mitaka did. I cannot remember her last name. She's a cool character so far though, but it still like kind of took me off guard. And the vibe of this part is definitely going to take some getting used to. That's all I want to say for this volume because I don't want to spoil too much, but it did take me up until volume 16, and I'll get to that. It did take me up until volume 16 to finally get used to this. I gave this volume 3.5 out of 5 stars. Book 2, we have Spy X Family, volume 9 by Tatsuya Endo. In this series, there's a Cold War going on, and our main character, Agent Twilight, is a spy, and he needs to create a fake family for Operation Strix. He convinces Yor to marry him, adopts a little girl named Anya, and goes by the name of Lloyd. However, Yor doesn't know that Lloyd is a spy, Lloyd doesn't know that Yor is an assassin, and neither of them know Anya is a telepath. But being a telepath, Anya knows everything, but she's also only 5, so there's a lot of shenanigans. So this volume, if you've seen the anime, this takes place near the end of the cruise arc. Is when the whole family gets together and actually interacts. The majority of this volume has been animated. It's like the last 2 chapters that goes into manga-only territory. So the beginning was very, very cute. I love seeing the family interact. Had me giggling and kicking my feet in the air, and Becky's shenanigans were absolutely hilarious. 4 out of 5 stars. It's also fucking fruit fly season, I guess. I don't know where these are coming from because I take out my garbage nearly every day and it's driving me fucking crazy. So I'm already apologizing if you see them fly in the video. I'm so scared. I don't know where they're coming from. Then I read volume 10, and as you can guess from the cover, we get Lloyd's backstory, and I knew he was going to have a tragic one just because of how stoic he is, but I just wasn't expecting how tragic it was, and just the contrast compared to like young Lloyd versus how he is now as a spy, and even then, adult Lloyd prior to becoming a spy to where we see him now 10 years later. That contrast was just startling just because present day Lloyd, he is a very strong man. He's, like I said, stoic. You don't want to mess with him. He's considered the best spy in the Wise agency. Whereas when he was younger, he was a little weakling. He was kind of a I hesitate to say crybaby, but he kind of was. He was talked down to a lot by his father, and he was told you'll never be a soldier. And then as he gets older, he does become a soldier. But he still, there's one scene that like made me cry actually, how emotional he used to be, because now he just hides that. Because part of the story is that he's gonna learn to open up the more he gets to know Yor and Anya. But when he was younger, just seeing him be able to break down, so I broke down. I was not expecting to cry in this series. So that definitely made this one of my favorite volumes in this whole series so far. And there's another character. We get a new character introduction that kind of changes things. That's a huge spoiler though, so I don't want to go into that, but I did get this volume 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read volume 11. In this volume we have the Red Circus arc. Major spoiler, so I don't want to tell you guys what that's about just in case you have not caught up. I actually really enjoyed this arc, which I'm learning through Twitter and the subreddit is actually a very unpopular opinion. Apparently a lot of people didn't like it because it is Eden school focused, so if you're not like in the loop with the Spy Family fandom, a lot of people tend to not like the chapters that focus on Anya and her friends. They want to see the family chapters, which is fine. It's called Spy Family, but part of the story too is seeing Lloyd alone with his job, Yor alone with her job, and sometimes we have to see Anya alone with her school. So that's what's happening in this arc. Like, Yor had her own arc with the cruise arc, now we get Anya's, and after this Lloyd has his own, but I'll get to that. But I really enjoyed it. I really like seeing Anya's bravery, and it's so funny because every time she's trying to help people, she can't tell them why. You know, no one knows she's a telepath, so she has to say the most outrageous things to throw people off. So this volume was funny. It's also another volume that made me cry because of the villain. I am a sucker for villains who absolutely adore their kids, and that's what's happening in this arc. I do really like how we're seeing Anya and Damien's friendship evolve. Maybe I shouldn't really say friendship at this point because he still kind of bullies her, but at the same time we are seeing his respect for her growing. I gave this 4.75 out of 5 stars. There was something still missing. I can't pinpoint what it is, but something very minor, which is why I couldn't give it 5 out of 5. Next we have volume 12, which is the last volume I read from the series. This was a really fun one too. In the beginning we kind of have some filler, not so filler chapters. The thing with Spy Family filler chapters is that they feel random. They're more so the slight... Got one. Let me go wash my hands. So Spy Family tends to have filler chapters, but I wouldn't call them filler. I would call them more so slice of life chapters because that's what this story is. It's slice of life with shonen elements. And those chapters tend to introduce things that come back later. So that's why I hesitate to say they're fully filler. But in the beginning, we have those slice of life chapters. I really like seeing Yor's shenanigans with her coworkers. There was a Twa-Yor moment that I really liked. And this is also the beginning of the Mole arc. I said in the last volume that each character of this family, they have their own arc going on. Now it's Lloyd's turn. His arc is the Mole arc. And what I really liked about this volume is that we do see Lloyd's feelings for Yor and Anya slowly growing, specifically for Yor. At this point, I still can't really tell if it's platonic or romantic. In canon, only 6 months has gone by, so I personally feel like it's more so platonic. It's obviously, knowing how these stories end, it's obviously eventually going to grow into romance. But right now he has more of a platonic, maybe he's like borderline, maybe that's where he's at. Either way, long story short, it is growing and I love to see it. It's so funny because he's the best spy, and from the beginning, Yor has clearly been one of his blind spots, and I love that for him. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars only because of Fiona. I am not the biggest fan of her character. Her whole personality is just being obsessed with Lloyd, which was kind of funny at first when it was just slice of life chapters, but now that it's like integrated in more plot driven chapters, it's like, girl, stand up, grow another personality, because this gag is getting annoying. So that's my only gripe with this. I really hope the author kind of gets rid of that running gag and just develops her a little more. But yeah, 4 out of 5 stars, so not a bad volume by any means. Then I read Chainsaw Man volume 13. It looks like I kept this review short and sweet. Oh, Denji. Poor Asa. Is it Asa or Asa? I'm gonna go with Asa. I know in English it would be pronounced Asa, but I don't know about Japanese. And I also learned that once again we cannot get attached to anyone in this series. 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then I started a new series, and this is the majority of the volumes you're going to be seeing. But I read The Promised Neverland Volume 1 by Kaiju Shiraya. This series is about a group of orphan children that live in Gracefield House. There is a person there that they refer to as Mom, and they're basically living a utopia. We have our 3 main kids, which are Emma, Norman, and Ray. And they love their lives. There's just one thing. All the kids that have left have never written them letters. So what is the outside world like? They find out and they are not very happy about it. It broke my heart, and I think I'm just gonna leave it at that. So this plot twist happens in the first chapter, but it still took me off guard. If you're interested in the series, I want you to be taken off guard. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. and I am really enjoying this. I have actually seen the first season of the anime. I was warned about the second season, so I've never gone on past that. And I remember really struggling with the anime. There's 12 episodes in the first season, and it took me until the halfway point to actually start enjoying it. So I was a little worried for this, but for some reason, I am surprisingly liking the manga a lot better than the anime, and I don't know why. I will say the first couple chapters, they're a bit too fast-paced because they're trying to fit in a lot of information. But after about chapter 2, chapter 3, it does find its groove and it does slow down into a very even pace. My thing with this is that there is still a lot of exposition to take in. I wish there wasn't so much, but I don't know how else the author could have done it, so it's kind of it's mixed emotions for me because I understand why it's there, but at the same time I wish there was other options. Because sometimes my brain was like, holy shit, like it was mentally, as much as I liked it, it was mentally exhausting to read this. But things I really do like, I really like the art style in this. There's something very like Sunday morning cartoon about it, and I'm obsessed. And I really like the designs of the main villains of the story. I don't know if I should spoil what they are, just because they are going to come up later. But the main villains, they are not human. There's something very religious about their design, almost something very occulty. They remind me, when they have their mask on, they remind me of the band Sleep Token. When they're off, they remind me of a Tim Burton character, specifically that snake thing in Beetlejuice. So I really like those designs. The one thing I am going to spoil, because it's impossible to talk about the series without spoiling this, but I really do like the mom as a villain. The non-human creatures, they're the villains of the series. She is kind of like the Darth Vader to their Palpatine. She's an evil mom. I'm always a sucker for an evil mom, and there's something just very subtle about her actions. They seem innocent. They seem like typical mom things, but there is always an ulterior motive for them, and that's like, it's what makes her scary. Like there's just something about villains who could just be like your everyday person that, like, that fact about them makes them scarier. But I had a lot of fun with this, 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read volume 2, and it's another volume that makes you really want to root for these kids. They are so smart, and I've been inspired to become smart. I wish I was as smart as them, specifically Ray and Norman. Emma is too. That's another thing about these three. They're the top 3 test scores of this orphanage. But Emma is more, how do I say this? She's more impulsive. She's the dreamer, while Ray and Norman work out the technicalities. And something that actually caught me off guard about this volume is that there's a character mentioned in the manga that I don't think was mentioned in the anime. I don't remember his name at all, so that made me more intrigued to continue on. The one thing about this is, again, like volume 1, because the author is still trying to world build and build these ideas and make this plan, there's a ton of exposition to take in. So I was so mentally exhausted at the end of the day because I read both volume 1 and 2 in one sitting, and I was tired. But then I read Chicago by Brian Doyle. I believe this is a fictionalized version of his actual life story. A man spends 5 months in Chicago and talks about his time there. I'm calling it fictionalized just because there is a dog in this named Edward who's very Snoopy-like, but I really enjoyed this book. This is definitely more so character-driven than plot-driven. It's an exploration of individuals' lives as the narrator basically interviews them. That's what this book felt like. It more so felt like the side stories characters and our main character happened to be there and he was interviewing these people. Especially because I listened to this on audiobook and each character has their own voice. So I felt like I was listening to interviews rather than an actual story, and I thought that brought an interesting aspect to it. And just because of that, I felt so close to all of the characters involved, and I could truly see why our author loved Chicago so much. And not because I went into this with a bias, like I'm from there, but then that was the other thing about loving this book so much, because I grew up there, so I recognized some of the places he talked about. So let me tell you, this book caused some massive nostalgia. But not only that, but it's also because I am at the same place in my life as our narrator is. Both of us, we grew up in a certain place, had a job offer, and we took these leaps. We packed up our lives and moved not only different cities, but we moved to different states. I believe he was from New York, moved to Chicago, and I'm from Chicago, and I moved to Philly. And then it also just made me realize how much I miss Chicago. I've been feeling very homesick lately. And I don't even think it's because I miss Chicago itself. I think it's because I miss the community I had there, because that's what this book is about too. It's more so about the community he had rather than Chicago itself. Like, this has been reviewed and lauded as a love letter to Chicago, which, yeah, it is, but to me, this was more so about the people he met. This book could be called anything else. It could be called New York City. It could be called Philadelphia. It could be called Boston. This book could literally take place in any other American cities outside of America, but he could still write the same story because at the end of the day, it wasn't about Chicago, it was about his community. He found a really loving community while he was in Chicago, and I actually felt so bad for him at the end of the book when he had to leave. But then at the same time, I was proud of him because he didn't leave because he was forced to. He left because he had another opportunity that he couldn't pass up, so he took some leaps and bounds, he took a risk, he's living his life. And like that's what I want to do. I took a risk moving here, and I saw it was bitter. The ending of this book was bittersweet, but because it made me so homesick as well, this made it to one of my top books of the year. I did give this 4.75 out of 5 stars. Go back to The Promised Neverland. I read volume 3. This is when we get to know Sister Crone more, and I really liked seeing her motives. It's so interesting because I actually hated her in the anime. I thought she was annoying, but she's a lot more bearable in the manga. And she's another one too where she's like trying to help these kids, but she has an ulterior motive. She doesn't care what happens to the kids, she just needs the mom, Isabella, to lose. But Isabella made me so angry in this, I actually wanted to punch my screen. As much as I love her as a villain, I was about to beat her fucking ass. But another reason I really like this volume is that we do get to see Isabella's backstory, and the fact that there's more to her, and the lore of this makes her character even more complex, obviously, but also just, it's complicated in a way because now the question is she really a villain? This is the volume that truly asks, is Isabella a villain or is she a product of her environment? Nature versus nurture. So I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read volume 4. It looks like my review for this one's short and sweet. It made me cry and the tables are turning on Isabella. The world around her is crumbling. She had everything in control. And now, thanks to my girl Emma, she is not in control. This is another one I gave 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then we move on to volume 5. Oh, and I misspoke for volume 3. We do not get her backstory in volume 3. We get it in this volume, actually. So I guess what I meant by more lore in volume 3 is that's when it starts to foreshadow Isabella's backstory. But back to volume 5, we get Isabella's backstory, and this is what made her my favorite character in the anime and in this as well. Again, because the complexity, nature versus nurture, and it's also like, what would you do if you were in her position? And there's a certain line she says in this that told me that part of her knows what she's doing is really fucked up, but she's doing what she can to survive. I gave this volume 4 out of 5 stars. Alright, volume 6. Now we are getting into the part that was not animated, so this is new material for me. In this volume, this is another volume with an insane amount of lore dump. There was so much exposition in this one as well. But this volume had me wondering if this story is a commentary on the meat industry. I'm going to leave it at that because, again, I don't want to spoil things, but Emma did bring up a good point. I think this story is also a commentary about hunting because Emma hunted and she felt bad, but then she was like, is it different if we do it for survival versus for fun? Something to think about. 4 out of 5 stars. Next, we have book 2 of the pre-series by Sierra Simone, which is Sinner. I'm reading this series because I made a deal with Olivia Savannah over at Olivia's Catastrophe. If I read this series, she will watch Attack on Titan. And this series, each book is in a different character's point of view. So this is an erotica series with a lot of religious elements. The first one was about a priest that fell in love. This book is about his brother, Sean, who is a huge sinner. He's an atheist, doesn't believe in God due to past trauma, but he falls in love with a woman who is training to be a nun. And I have to say, I have the same compliments of this book that I have in the last video, that it's actually just extremely well written, and I love all the characters involved. I like the religious elements, especially as someone who grew up in the Catholic Church, so there were a lot of things I was recognizing, not only because they're just so obvious that even non-Catholics know about them, but just also even like the subtle things that only Catholics will catch on to. And just that there is a plot, because I feel like I went into this erotica series, just erotica in general, because that's not a genre I read from. I went into this with just a gross misunderstanding that they don't really have plots to their stories, but this one very much does. And I found this one, the last book was an exploration of Catholic guilt, I felt like. It is honestly one of the best depictions of Catholic guilt I've ever read about. But this one, I feel like, is an exploration of grief in a sense, but also just anger and religious trauma specifically towards the Catholic Church. And I feel like the author captured it really well. I'm sure a lot of people out there know about the controversies of the Catholic Church back in the early 2000s. It was revealed that a ton of priests are unfortunately pedophiles, and it ruined the church for a lot of people. I am one of those people. One of the reasons I walked away is because why would I want to be associated with something like that? And without spoiling too much, it is one of the reasons our main character Sean is so angry at the church. And I like how the author explored that, because if within Catholic circles too, just in real life, at least within my family and my close friends, it's a constant conversation we're having. Like, we like the ideology of Catholicism. I say I'm Catholic just because it's easier. But when we talk about like Catholicism as an institution, it hurts too much. Like, I know for a lot of people, one of the reasons it was such hard news hearing it about the priests being pedophiles was that it was hard to hear, because here are these men that you trust that go up there and tell you about God's glory and, you know, these crimes are a sin, and yet you find out that those same people you trusted so much and told you it's a sin have committed that horrendous sin. And it's like, what do you do with that information? Like, how are you supposed to handle that? And I like that the author's having this conversation, just because I do think it's an important conversation to have. Olivia Savannah told me she is a practicing Catholic, so I know this woman has probably heard it all. And even as a practicing Catholic, I'm actually like proud of her for exploring it and discussing it, just because I find in real life, granted this is, you know, purely anecdotal, in real life I find that the non-believers in my family, or the cultural Catholics I like to call ourselves, it's easier for us to talk about it and come to terms with it than it is for the people who are believers. So in a way, I feel like she's kind of brave for openly discussing it, because in a lot of Catholic circles too, people don't talk about it. They just act like it never happened. But anyway, I am getting very philosophical regarding that. To make a long story short, I think she described Sean's anger well with it. I was getting angry along with him. I understood why he was angry, and I felt for him. So I feel like because of that, this book is actually tougher to get through than the first one on an emotional level. I really liked how she wrapped everything up and how just he was comforted in the end. Just a few things about this book though. My first thing, it's not really a gripe, it's more so something I found funny, is that Sean explicitly says multiple times throughout this book that he is a bad guy. He's a bad boy, Zenny should not fall in love with him. And it's just so funny because he doesn't act like what I think a bad boy would act like. He's actually very respectful towards women, which is not a bad thing. Thank you for being respectful towards us, but it's just, when a character calls himself a bad boy, that's not what I'm expecting. There is a hard to ignore age gap in this. I know some people have the suspension of disbelief. I was kind of wishy-washy on it. Didn't make me stop reading the book, clearly. But Sean is 36, I think. He's at least in his mid-30s. Zenny is only 21. So take that as you will. Granted, when I was 21, you can kind of relate to Zenny in that sense. Like, yes, I wanted to meet a 36-year-old man, but in retrospect, even at 26 years old, in retrospect, I'm glad that did not happen. So take that as you will. And something I actually have a major complaint about is that Zenny is very innocent in this book. Like, Sean actually has to tell her a lot, which was a little concerning to me. I know people like that exist. It's just, in Zenny's specific situation and her specific case, I just have a hard time believing she's that innocent. First of all, she's the child of a doctor. I feel like a doctor would keep their children, or should keep their children, educated on that. I'm sure in real life that's not really the case, and maybe that's what the author is basing it on. Just to me, that felt really weird. And another thing, she went to Midwestern Catholic schools. As someone from the Midwest and grew up in an actually very Catholic area, it is like an unspoken fun fact among everyone that Catholic schools tend to be even more sinful than public schools. They just don't talk about it. Like, again, I'm sure this is purely anecdotal, but like the girls on my block that went to Catholic schools and made fun of me for going to the sinful public school, they had more stories than I did by the time we entered high school. And just hearing some of the stories my parents told me about, because they went to Catholic schools their whole lives and all their siblings, my girl Zenny has seen some shit. She should not have to have all these things explained to her. And also just my other gripe with this is that it is one of the tropes of this book. Like, I know some people find it cute when the older man has to tell the young innocent woman how things work. To me, that trope's not cute. I don't like seeing that in real life. When someone is Zenny's age and they aren't that innocent, I actually don't find that okay. I find that more so concerning. There are certain things I think at 21 you should know for your own safety. I know a lot of it is just the Catholic teachings towards sex, and there's just so much trauma involved in that. That's why I hate it so much. So whenever like those type of scenes came up in this book, I kind of like stopped listening because that made me more so uncomfortable rather than rooting for them. But again, I did not stop reading this book. I did give it 4 out of 5 stars. I docked a star because of all those gripes, but I have to give it 4 out of 5 just because the anger was described so well. Then I read Chainsaw Man Volume 15 by Tatsuki Fujimoto. I forgot to write about this in my notes, so I don't really know what else to say, but I do remember my initial reaction to this was that like, what was the point of this? I didn't know what to take from this volume. I did enjoy the exploration of Denji's trauma from part 1, and I did really like the design of the falling devil, but that's basically it. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read 5 volumes of The Promised Neverland. So first we have volume 7. This was my least favorite volume. This is what I call a transition volume, and that's when volumes in manga transition between arcs. For some reason, no matter the manga I read, like I had this problem with Tokyo Ghoul, I had this problem with Death Note, I had this problem with Demon Slayer. When we're in the transition periods, I don't want to say a hard time because I don't dislike them, but they're just not my favorite parts of the manga. But the man that I've seen everywhere on Twitter, he is finally introduced in this volume. That being said, volume 8 is my favorite volume of the manga so far. This is the beginning of the Goldie Pond arc, which I have seen people hype up everywhere on Twitter, so I was very nervous going into it. I was afraid y'all hyped it up a little too much, but it's nothing at all like what I expected. My jaw was on the floor with that when that plot twist happened, and I even cried at some point, so 5 out of 5 stars. Then we get to volume 9. I don't have a lot of notes for this either, but we do learn more about the family that was mentioned in the manga, but not the anime, and a certain character that leaves at one point, and I was very upset about, is now back. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I read volume 10, which is my second least favorite volume of the series. This volume is extremely action-packed, but it doesn't do a lot to push the plot forward. So that critique is more so a me thing rather than a critique towards the author. Because like, these things have to happen in order to push the plot forward at some point. I just wish it was rearranged differently. It makes the pacing feel very choppy the way he has it in this volume. But again, that's more so a me thing. I see online that people had no problem with it. The majority of people had no problem with it. So I'm just, you know, the odd one out. There's a backstory of one of the creatures in this that was the most interesting part of this volume. But it also at the same time made me realize that, because Isabella's not like really in the picture anymore. It does more so focus on our main villains now. But it made me realize I had more fun reading when Isabella was a villain. Like, she was the best one so far. And another thing I've noticed with this volume is that the stakes in this series aren't as high as I want them to be, because there are a ton of people surviving, which I know sounds like a weird critique, especially because one of Emma's goals is to save as many people as she can. But like, when you're just in the situation they're in, that I can't describe because spoilers, I guess in a sense I can't. They're in like a Hunger Games situation. Like, in order to make me feel like they're truly in danger, I kind of want a little bit more death. So that's why I'm kind of having a hard time with this volume. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. And the last volume of The Promised Neverland I read was volume 11. And this is the defeat of one of the creatures. And something I really liked about this is actually how long it took to defeat him. because it truly showed how strong he was. This is also the start of the new arc, so it did have that like awkward pacing that transition period tends to have, but it was really cute, so I don't mind it. I'll have my suspension of disbelief. I gave this volume 4 out of 5 stars. Then we have the last volume of Chainsaw Man that I read, and that is volume 16. As you can tell from my ratings of the other volumes, I've been feeling pretty indifferent to part 2 so far, just because I couldn't really tell what the author was trying to do with it. He was introducing too many things at once. We spent a lot of time trying to get to know Asa, when I feel like Denji should still be the main character, but that's a whole other thing. But then we get to this volume and like a cult is introduced, and now my interest is piqued. And it's also another volume that proves to not get attached to any of these characters because they will get killed off. But I will say one character I'm really enjoying, even though we don't know too much about her just yet. I really do like Nayuta. I don't know if that's a spoiler. Chainsaw Man I try to avoid as much as I can on social media because y'all will not shut the fuck up. I was spoiled for so many things in part 1 before I got to read about them. So I don't want to know more opinions at all. I just want to form them on my own, but I really do like Nayuta. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Rascal by Sterling North. I am trying to read as many books that were adapted into Disney movies as I can, and this is one of them. This is a memoir about Sterling North's youth in southern Wisconsin when he had a pet raccoon that he named Rascal. This is cute, but it was also kind of boring. I went into this expecting more time with Rascal, but this book is more so about southern Wisconsin than it is Rascal. Rascal just happened to be there. I forgot what town he's in, but I feel like this book should actually be called The Town and not Rascal. This book very much feels like he wanted to write about southern Wisconsin, but then his editors were like, no, you need to grab kids' attention. You know what kids love? Animals. Squeeze in Rascal, and that's what he did and why it's named Rascal. And then my other thing with this book is that it kind of just ends. I was listening to this on audiobook at work, and I had to listen to it a few times for it to sink in that that was indeed the conclusion. I feel like we didn't really get a proper one. I wanted to know more about how he felt about his situation, but we didn't get that. So yeah, 3 out of 5 stars. And finally, the last book I read in May and my last manga, that is Shuna's Journey by Hayao Miyazaki. This is about Shuna, who is a prince of his very, very poor land. He finds out about these grains, I think they're called grains or beans, one of the two. And basically the story behind these things is that if you have them, you and your town will prosper. So he goes on a journey to go find them. Miyazaki wrote this before creating Studio Ghibli, so this is the early days of his storytelling. And I really enjoyed this. This actually made it to one of my top books of the year so far. Something about it just felt like a magical fairy tale, which all his movies, most of his movies make me feel that way. There is some gorgeous watercolor art in this. Let's see if I can hold some up. That truly pushes the story along. There is text throughout the story too, and the text tells more than it shows, but I feel like the art makes up for that. Like if you read the text on its own, it does feel like they're spoon feeding you, and it feels very on the nose and makes the characters seem 2D, but the minute details in the art and just the extravagance as well brings in that nuance. I can really see the influence for Studio Ghibli. Some of these designs actually made it into future movies, like all the clothes that Shuna's town wears, I believe you can see in Nausicaa. For sure, Castle in the Sky. This animal also makes it to a few of the movies. My one thing with this, and it's why I didn't give it 5 out of 5 stars, is that I do wish it was just a bit longer. It was like a sweet conclusion for what Miyazaki was going for, but I myself just feel like the journey wasn't completed, and I would have liked to see a bit more, and that's why I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. But that's it. That's all the books I read in the month of May. My throat hurts. My nose is on fire. It is so itchy. I don't know why it only itches when I'm filming these videos, but it drives me nuts. But my battery is dying and it's 8:30 and I haven't eaten dinner yet, so I'm gonna peace out. Let me know your thoughts down below if you read any of these or are intrigued by reading them. Let me know if you're ever gonna do manga May in the future. Hopefully next year I can actually complete that. But if you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, comment, subscribe. Y'all know the drill. Without further ado, I'm gonna peace out and I'll see you guys later. Ciao tutti.